Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to today's live stream. I'm super excited today. We have a really cool guest. Kaleigh Moore is going to be joining us. If you're not familiar with Kaleigh's work, she is a well-known freelance writer for over 10 years. She's worked with publications like Vogue Business, Fast Company, Entrepreneurs magazine, as well as businesses like Stripe, Shopify, Amazon, all kinds of big name brands. And she also provides all kinds of content and resources for other freelancers to help them build their business, get better clients, do better work, all kinds of stuff. And so we're really excited to have her on today. We're going to be focusing primarily on the idea of client screening or evaluation, client qualification, onboarding, and offboarding. I think these are three really important mechanisms in sort of growing your service business, whether you're a freelancer or an agency. Um, and the power of these is also sort of overlooked in my opinion. We'll get into this a little bit more, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for you to actually grow your business by being smarter about the way that you qualify clients. So saying no can actually help you grow your business. So I'm excited to dig in with Kaleigh on that topic today. Before we get into it, I want to have a couple quick requests for you. Number one, if you've not already, please hit like on this video. Help other folks find it. Help us grow our audience. Go ahead and subscribe to us on YouTube as well. At least once a month, we host live workshops, Q&As, all kinds of cool stuff for content marketing and SEO folks, especially freelance writers, freelance content marketing folks. You'll find all kinds of great content on our channel. So hit that subscribe button and join us there. Number two, if you're not already a member of Tofu, I'd like to invite you to join. So top of the funnel is our free community for content marketing and SEO folks. We are creeping up on 3,000 members there. We've got a library of resources, about 120 total resources in our sort of Notion library, in addition to the free Slack. Inside Slack, there's all kinds of discussions going on, people asking questions, getting feedback, sharing work opportunities. It's just a great little community of folks from freelancers to agencies to in-house marketers. We'd love to have you join us there. So pop over to yesoptimist.com/tofu and you can join us there. It's totally free. Number three, pop into the comments, say hello. Let us know who's there. We'd love to see who's joining us today. As we go through today's Q&A, we'd love to ask for your input. So your questions as we're discussing topics. This is a live Q&A, so feel free to pop into the chat with your questions, and we'll try to get them answered by myself or Kaleigh. As always, this is also sort of a general Q&A. So if you have other questions as we're going through, maybe not directly related to the topics, but related to building, growing your business as a freelancer, as an agency, etc., feel free to pop those as well. We'll try to get you some thoughts and ideas there as well. Okay, well, all of my intro and preamble out of the way. Once again, I'd like to introduce today's guest, Kaleigh Moore. I'm really excited to have her on.
Hello.
Hey, Kaleigh, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. I'm looking forward to this chat. So let's get into it.
Yeah, likewise. We were just talking before the stream, and you're mentioning that you were at Shop Talk this week.
Yes, I was. I have never been to Shop Talk before. For anybody who's not familiar, it's a retail-focused, massive trade show / conference, and it's out in Las Vegas. I had never been to Vegas before, so all kinds of new experiences for me this week.
That's awesome.
A whole new world.
Have you sort of intentionally kind of leaned into that niche of sort of like retail tech and that kind of space, or how did that play out?
Yeah, so I had an Etsy store when I was in college, and one of my very first clients that I got hired for as a content writer was in this e-commerce landscape. And because I had that personal experience as a business owner that I could pull from when writing, that was a really nice advantage for me to bring to those conversations of, hey, I understand your customers in a really unique and personal way. And so that's kind of how I ended up in this landscape of retail and e-commerce. Is I was a merchant, then I became a content writer, found that I was a better writer than I was an e-commerce merchant. And so again, just kind of brought that foundational experience along with me.
I love that. I just it's so fascinating to me hear different freelancers and agency owners and their journey and I mean there's all kinds of stories out there, but I think the takeaway for me is always like there's no one path, right? It's
Oh,
kind of
no.
embracing the things that you love, embracing the things that you're good at, whatever it is, right there. There's sort of a mix of the alchemy that happens there, and sort of leads
Yeah.
you down the path that works for you.
Definitely. Yeah, it's different for every person, and every time I go to one of these conferences, for example, I always wanna hear people's story of, like, "How did you end up here?" And it's always so interesting and so different for each person, so, yeah,
Totally,
wild.
totally. Well, I'm super excited to dig in today. So, just to kind of preface everything for the folks joining us on our live stream, Kaylee and I recently connected. She was generous enough to share some email templates with us for our MoFu community. And part of the bundle there, right, was it was essentially three emails. One was an email dedicated to sort of qualifying and setting expectations with a new potential client. One focused on kind of onboarding and setting expectations with the client as you're sort of entering into the process, and one focused on offboarding and asking for referrals and sort of wrapping up an engagement and kind of maximizing that opportunity. And so, as we were discussing these email templates, we were talking a lot about what the value of these processes was, and sort of having these processes in the first place, but also thinking about them as kind of a force multiplier for growing your business and helping you figure out some of the challenges as you grow and scale. Um, Kaylee, I'd love to know, with those templates in mind, like take me back to kind of the beginning, and was there like a specific moment where you realized that you needed like more of a system or a defined process for handling these steps with clients?
Yes. So I think probably about 3 years into freelancing full time, I found myself spending a lot of time doing the same things over and over and over again, but tying up a lot of time with those processes. And it was
Mm,
cutting into my writing time. And so as my workload grew and my client base grew, which is wonderful and exciting, I realized that there simply wasn't enough hours in the day to get everything done and to do things well and to keep it at that professional quality level that I wanted to maintain. I kind of saw myself quickly sliding into this place of things getting sloppy and more brief and less polished. And I really believed that those things were part of what was getting me hired. And again, this was something that I took from my e commerce experience. When I owned a jewelry business, I had an Etsy store. The first thing I did when I started that process was I worked at an eye care place. So I took home the little eye care glasses boxes. They came in these little nice long skinny boxes, and I would make custom labels for them, and I would put tissue paper inside. I'd do a handwritten note, I'd roll it up and tie it with a piece of string. It was very elaborate, but it was so memorable. And I took that experience and I applied that to my freelancing business too. And so this attention to detail, customization, personalization, all of those things tied in really nicely with that business as well. And that's when I started to think, okay, I need to templatize this so I can maintain the level of quality, but also be more efficient and stop kind of doing the same things over and over again when they're very tedious processes, if that makes sense.
totally. Yeah, I think you hit on two really interesting themes that I think is easy for people to overlook, right? One is, that the idea of like personalization and that attention to detail. I think so many people forget that 90% of this work is about the relationship. It's
Yes.
like you can be a great writer, you can be a mediocre writer, whatever, you can be anywhere in your journey or your career, but so much of your success is going to be built on just building those relationships and maintaining those
Mhm.
relationships, and that comes from those small touches, and really sort of personalizing and thinking about the detail and making sure that the client gets the information they need and they feel confident and comfortable working with you.
Yes. And especially when you're first getting started with a new client, you want to make that strong first impression. You don't want to have silly mistakes and be going too fast and have things be sloppy. You really need it to look professional and polished and like you absolutely know what you're doing, because that new client is kind of going out on a limb working with you. Maybe they've come through a referral, or somebody has given you a green light on them, basically, but you need to back that up with the actual work being very good. And that extends to beyond the writing itself. It extends to the client communication, it extends to the process related details. All of those things make up the entire experience.
Yeah, 100%. And then the other thing that you sort of touched on there is something that I think we'll dig into throughout this conversation is like, essentially the opportunity cost of
Mm.
spending time on this stuff, right? So as you said, right, we've all got 24 hours in a day. We all think we can do more than we really can. And maybe you think that the challenge, in your business or as a freelancer where you're at right now is, that you just don't have enough work or whatever it is. But at some point, you're inevitably going to realize that actually you're spending a bunch of time doing stuff that's not really helping you grow, right? So you're, crafting these emails or doing this stuff or looking for documents or whatever it is. And because that part of your business is messy, that takes away time that you could be spending, networking or marketing
Mhm.
yourself or doing client work or whatever it is, right? And so as much as you can sort of minimize that overhead, I think it just sets you up for success long term where you can spend more time focused on the things that actually move your business forward.
Right. I totally agree. And I think it takes a little bit of time to get to that place to where you need to start thinking about maximizing efficiency. I think it's nice to have that initial period where you're kind of working out the kinks and you're figuring out what works best for you. But once you have those details locked in, that's when you can start to templatize. And that just takes that really tedious piece out of that entire equation. And again, like you said, then you have more time for billable projects, right? And that's going to help you grow your business.
100%, 100%. So the first email kind of in this sequence or in this series is focused on sort of qualifying or kind of
Mhm.
setting expectations with clients. Can you tell us a little bit about your qualifications personally as a freelancer? How do you sort of evaluate a potential client and decide if it's a good fit for you?
Yeah. So when I was first getting started, of course, I did what everybody does, and I said yes to every project that came my way. That very quickly became exhausting because you're learning from scratch every single time. You're starting from zero. You have no subject matter expertise. You're just flying by the seat of your pants, truly. And so as I started to narrow down my focus into this world of like e-commerce and retail and the software that works within this space, I started to get more requests and more referrals. And so my business started to grow. And so what I quickly realized was that if I wanted to do less of that kind of ad hoc work that was coming my way through my existing network and people who kind of peripherally knew what I was doing, but didn't really specifically know what my area of focus was, I needed to do a better job of screening clients in the first place and making sure that they would kind of fall into that primary bucket of folks that I were trying to work with more. And so screening was a big part of that. And we can talk more about that specifically. But I think at a high level, the reason I realized I needed to do that was because I was spending a lot of time talking to people who were coming kind of through the contact form on my website or reaching out through social media who were not a good fit. And again, if we're talking about time becoming a precious resource very quickly, again, this was one of those things where I can't keep doing this. I'm spending 6 hours a week on the phone with prospects who are not a good fit. They're tying up my time. It doesn't end up resulting in work. And I need to do a better job of screening these people so that I can, again, focus on projects that are billable and make money instead of just kind of spinning my wheels endlessly.
Yeah, totally understand that. And do you have sort of a specific set of criteria or, how do you think
Yeah.
about qualifying?
Yeah, so I added a contact form to my website. That's kind of my initial phase of screening people. And so I ask a few strategic questions. They're very simple. Things like, what is your company? Do you have a content strategy? That's a big one because if they don't have a content strategy yet, they're not ready to work with me, and that's not a service that I offer. What's your budget? That's probably the biggest one of like, do you have the money to pay for my services? If not, let me refer you to somebody who's maybe a little more junior or a better fit for this. And then what's your potential start date? So how quickly are you
Mm.
looking to get started? Is this realistic for my existing workload, schedule, life, etc.? So those are kind of the main buckets for that contact form that help me decide, should I get on the phone with this person? Is it a good fit or is it a better fit for a referral?
Totally makes sense. And do you have sort of a rough idea of, approximately how many of the inquiries you get are, sort of worth pursuing or feel like a good fit from the initial contact?
That's a good question. It really evolves over time. I think in the early days, it was pretty low that it was good fit clients because the best leads that I've always gotten have come through referrals. So it's not somebody who's found me through a Google search. It's been more of a direct line of contact. However, it has helped a lot. Again, cutting down with the time that I was spending on the phone with these prospecting calls, where I didn't have enough information up front. So I would have to get on the phone and schedule a
Mm.
meeting and then plan my whole day around said meeting and just having, again, no shows. That was a huge problem. No shows for these calls. So I've oriented my whole day around these conversations and then they don't show up. I'm sure
Yep.
everybody can relate with that. It's so frustrating. I'm also a very anxious person. So having these calls on my calendar, it's all I can think about all day long. And so my whole brain power is devoted towards planning for these conversations. And then people wouldn't show up or they wouldn't be good fits. And I'd just be so frustrated all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. I totally know how that goes as well.
Oh, it's brutal.
uh, um, so I wanted to jump in really quick. Sean had a question in the chat that I think is relevant here. So obviously we've been talking right now about sort of generating those initial or those inquiries and sort of qualifying and screening them. A little bit of a detour or sort of a step back, but like generally speaking, like where do you feel like most of your leads or actual clients come from, or like what have been the most effective marketing channels and strategies for you?
Yeah. Promoting my website, I've never really done a great job of that. Again, most of my business has come through referrals. It does help that I have a lot of really powerful backlinks with the reporting work that I've done for places like Forbes, Vogue Business. So of course, that boosts the quality score of my website. If you're familiar with SEO at all, that really helps me rank well for the website. I think really what my website has become is more of a point of validation. So it's a place for people to
Mm,
go to look for elements of social proof, to check out my portfolio. That's where I house my newsletter, which is for freelance writers. It's not even really client oriented, but I've been sending out a newsletter since 2016, twice a month. So very consistent there. That has helped promote the website. Very active on social media, specifically Twitter. So that's been a good place. Again, if people have questions, I can direct them to my website from there. And again, share the blog content, which is where I syndicate the newsletter. But other than that, I honestly haven't done a whole lot. I've never run ads. I've never really done guest blogging. All of these are great ways to promote your website, but just things that I haven't really needed to do. So,
I have to chuckle a little bit, Kaleigh, because I feel like the strategy that you just described is, I would say, fairly sophisticated compared to
mm,
what most freelancers do. In terms of you've got a blog, you're creating content, you've got a
mhm,
newsletter, you're sort of doing all of these things that would be part of most companies' content marketing strategy. You're applying
mhm,
to yourself, which I think is sort of the ironic thing in our space, right? Is we get a lot of questions from freelancers. How do I get more clients? How do I market myself? Well, look at the work that you do, right? It's content marketing in most cases, right? And a lot of the strategies that you need to be thinking about as a freelancer are essentially the same strategies that your clients are hiring you to help with in the first place, right? So creating
exactly.
that content, making a name for yourself, distributing that content via social media, newsletters,
Mhm,
as you said, guest posting, whatever the strategies are. But really, it just comes down to building that flywheel over time, right?
it
Like
does.
I think that's the thing that people maybe misunderstand when they look at someone like you, Kaleigh, who's just you obviously you've had a ton of success, you've worked with these big name clients, but I'm guessing you probably didn't start there.
Oh, no. Oh my gosh. Would you like me to list some of the things that I did when I was just getting started? It's wild. Let's see. I wrote website copy for a steel company. They did like molded steel and iron gates and things like that. I wrote about HVAC for a while for a company blog. I did medical compliance content marketing for a while. I mean, I did social media content. I told you I was flying by the seat of my pants. I would say yes to absolutely anything. The beauty of that is that it was very informative in that it taught me very quickly what I liked, what I didn't like, and what I was good at and what I was not good at. So I think that period of experimentation is very important because it does help you kind of find out those things which you can only learn through trial and error. But it happens very quickly where you're like, absolutely not. I never want to do that again. I hated that. I loved that. That sucked. That was great. It was very informative. So yes, I did not start out and just everything went smoothly right from the beginning. So I don't want to paint too rosy of a picture about my career.
Yeah, I appreciate that transparency, and I think just again an important reminder for folks is that Kaleigh, you've been doing this what for 10 years or so,
10
right? And
years,
so
yeah.
yeah, building that flywheel, growing that brand over time, it doesn't happen overnight. You've got to
Mm-mm.
invest in it. That's the other mistake I see a lot of folks make, right? Is that they're like, oh hey, I've been marketing myself so hard. I wrote 2 blog posts and I spent 2 months marketing and I didn't get any leads. Well, yeah, because it takes longer than that to
It
build a brand and a
was a
reputation.
long game for sure. For sure.
Okay, sorry, we got a little bit sidetracked there on marketing. Folks, happy to answer questions again related to marketing or lead gen, that kind of stuff. But I want to actually come back to the idea of screening or qualifying clients because this was something that's I think a counterintuitive reality that I've learned over the years is that, and you sort of alluded to this in some of your responses before, but the idea that actually being more aggressive or more selective in in which clients you take on can actually help you get more clients, or at least better clients, certainly in the long run. Can you say a little bit about how, as you've gotten more selective about your clients, how that's kind of helped you grow and evolve your business?
Yes. So I think being more selective, saying no more often. Again, this seems so counterintuitive because you want to say yes to anything that comes your way because you're trying to grow your business. The counterintuitive reality of this is that when you start saying yes to projects that are more aligned with your existing knowledge base, your subject matter expertise, what you enjoy doing, you have more time for those projects. So again, this is a great way to set up a referral network too, which you can incentivize through, if it's not a good fit for you, if you have a roster of fellow writers who maybe work in adjacent industries or do similar kind of complementary services to the things that you're offering, this is a great way for you to set up a referral network and say, like, okay, if I have people who come to me who want content strategy, for example, I don't want to do that, but I have somebody who's very good at it. I can kick them to her and she'll send me a referral of like
Mm.
10% or whatever we decide the arrangement is. So I'm still getting a little bit of money out of the time I'm investing in having these conversations and saying, this isn't a fit for me, but you should talk to this person. So that's a nice additional revenue stream that you can create for yourself. But like I said, at the same time, by saying no to those projects, you have more time to focus on the things that truly make sense for you, that you're good at, that you enjoy, that pay you well.
Hmm.
And again, what you do becomes stickier too, because instead of being this generalist who will do anything and everything, you become a
Hmm.
specialist who's known for this one very specific thing that they're very good at within this specific niche. And so it feels scary to say no to things and to be like, no, I don't really do that. But it can be very powerful because it, again, generates that additional revenue stream if you set up the referral network, and frees up your schedule. So you have time for things that do make sense. Because what always happens is the minute you say yes to a project that you didn't really want to do, a really perfect fit one comes through the door right behind it. And you're like, oh, dang it. I should have had my calendar open. And so missed opportunity. I've had that happen so many times.
Right. And then, as we were just talking about, right, all of this, the marketing, the self-promotion, building your own brand, building your own reputation, like that obviously takes time and energy too. And right. And so if
Mm-hmm.
you're spending, your whole week is focused on doing a bunch of work that doesn't really reflect the business you're trying to build, or doesn't align well with your skills, then that's time that you don't have to be building your business and getting those good clients, so the right clients that you
That's
actually
right.
want to come through the door.
That's right.
And so, so again, just going back to that idea of opportunity cost, I think that's something that people overlook a lot of times, is that they're so focused on, how do I get that next client in? How do I make that next dollar, that they sort of forget the bigger picture and
Mm-hmm.
and kind of lose sight of that. To play a little bit of devil's advocate there, I think, a lot of folks, are, perhaps in sort of a more lean, they're in a lean time, right? They're looking to
Mm-hmm.
take on work just to kind of pay the bills.
Sure.
And so, for them hearing, oh, just say no to work that comes through the door, might not just seem counterintuitive. It might seem totally crazy. So
Right.
do you have any tips for folks like that? Maybe if you're in that situation where, you're looking to just make enough money to pay the bills next week, how might you approach that differently?
Yeah. So I think it's a really situational basis that you have to make these decisions on. Like, how are things going in your business right now? So I took a sabbatical at the end of last year. This is a really perfect example. Even 10 years into my career, took 3 years off at the end of last year, came back in January, and felt like I was starting from scratch again. So I was kind of in that position of, I'm going to have to say yes to some projects that maybe normally wouldn't be a super perfect fit, but I need to be busy. I need to start making money again. And so I'm going to have to be a little bit more flexible. And so what happened was, normally I'm pretty strict about staying with blog content for SaaS e-commerce companies, software as a service e-commerce companies. And I expanded that reach a little bit because I had some people who came my way who were kind of outside that industry. Also, a few website copywriting projects, which I hadn't done in a really long time. But again, that's the work that was coming my way. Needed to pay some bills. So I was like, sure, I can do that. And what I found was it was actually really refreshing because it helped me sharpen some skills that I hadn't used for a while. It mixed up the type of work that I was doing a little bit. So I got to diversify my projects a little bit. And it kept me busy until that steady stream of work that was super good fit came back again. And so I think that this is kind of a mindset you have to maintain the entire span of a freelance career, of being adaptable, having a varied skill set. Even if you are a specialist, I think it's good to always be learning and, again, keeping skills sharp that you maybe had in the past, learning new
Mhm.
skills, adding that out so you have a little bit more variety of services that you can offer if the need arises. But yeah, you have to be very flexible and adaptable because it's all on you, right? To keep yourself busy. There's no steady paycheck. There's no salary that's guaranteed. It's all on you. So that mentality is very, very important.
Yeah, so it sounds like something that you would recommend there is sort of adjusting your qualification criteria, kind of based on your specific circumstances, right? So as you said, perhaps you're less selective as you're sort of starting out, or when you don't have much work to do, and then as you start to pick up projects, become increasingly more selective, and just
Yes.
sort of kind of ratchet up the process over time.
Yes, absolutely. And again, if you can be flexible and adaptable, then I think that that's kind of the secret to having a successful freelance career. When you get really rigid in your rules and in your processes and in your skill set, that's when things start to get a little bit more precarious because you aren't as able to adapt to all the changes that are happening all the time. Sometimes the economy is bad. Sometimes content marketing budgets are the first thing to get slashed, but people always need a website. So you need to shift to website copy again. Again, you just kind of have to be mindful of the conditions of the place, the environment you're working in, and see like, okay, what do I need to do today? What do I need to do this month?
Do you have any, sort of specific processes or anything that you use internally to kind of gauge that, or is it just sort of, based on kind of feel, or how do you think about it?
Yeah, it's all just kind of based on feel. I'm very low, like low to no frills when it comes to software around my business. And so I have a little notepad on my desk that I keep all of my assignments on. I keep it a little steno pad on my desk. And so if the steno pad is not full, then I'm like, okay, we need to get creative here. We need to host some workshops. We need to reach out to some clients that we haven't worked with in a while. And so, yes, it's very much gut based, but also notebook based as well.
Totally understand that. I think that's I love that as sort of like a literal visual representation of like how full your plate is, and you can
Yes.
like see
Yeah.
that, and that's sort of a constant reminder.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that idea. Um, that just gave me one other thought that I'd love to just throw your way real quick. How do you feel about, sort of like pitching work, or like applying, like let's say somebody posts that they're hiring a freelance writer, versus, you know, creating content and trying to kind of build your own brand. So sort of outbound versus inbound, if you will.
Yes, I am not a big pitcher and I never really have been. And that is because of my personality. I'm just not somebody who enjoys or is good at sales. And I feel like you really kind of have to be able to shift into that mode of I'm putting myself out there, I'm going to do my research and really go out on a limb here. And that makes me wildly uncomfortable. I can do it, I have done it, but I don't love it and I try not to prioritize it. So I'm very much more oriented towards using social media, using my existing network, putting out an ask on those types of places. So it's much more passive rather than strategically pitching individuals.
Mm.
Um, so it's a lot of like asking for warm introductions. If there's somebody that I already know at a company that I want to work with, I'll say, hey, can you connect me with your content marketing person? So it's a version of that, but it's way more low stakes. There's the chances of success are much higher because there is a foot in the door almost. And so
Mhm.
again, that's kind of a testament to building out your personal network to help your business grow, going to conferences and participating in Slack channels and on social media and places like that where people who are in your industry having conversations. When you do that, it opens the door to those warm introductions and it just makes the whole process so much easier.
Yeah, totally. I think one of the things that I often tell people, is that there's no one way to like grow your business or get leads, right? So as you said, maybe, hey, I'm not really a pitcher, but I'm really good at writing content, so I'm going to use, my own
Hmm.
content skills to create content and build my own brand. Last month we had a session with Lizzie Davy where she shared her like warm pitching method, which is, sort of essentially a kind of a take on networking. Other folks are great at cold emails. Some people,
Hmm.
run ad campaigns, whatever it is. I think the key here that people get so overwhelmed with all these different strategies. At the end of the day, it's really about just picking one thing and just committing
Mhm.
to doing it day in and
Yes.
day out to build your business. That's it. Just one thing and just do it over and over again.
I think that's so true because otherwise you're trying to keep all these plates spinning and you're kind of pulled in all these different directions and you're doing a lot of things, but you're not really doing any one thing super well. I feel like that's a
Yep.
good rule for life too. You know, you kind of have to narrow your focus because nobody's good at everything. You have to be good at a few specific things.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, could not agree more. And so if you're sitting there and you're wondering, hey, how do I get more clients? How do I build my brand? How should I spend my time? I think that's where, you should default basically to this, some sort of marketing for yourself, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
creating content and publishing it or getting on podcasts or,
Yes.
cold pitching or whatever it is, you have some default mode that you sort of fall back to. Hey, I've got free time. I don't have work right now. That time is going to be dedicated to doing this marketing and business development work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I love everything that we've touched on so far. Real quick before we sort of pivot, and I want to talk in a moment here about sort of the actual onboarding process and sort of setting expectations and systems up front, because I think that's another huge lever here. As I mentioned before at the top of the session, right? So Kaleigh was nice enough to share some email templates with us. Those email templates are part of our Mofu content library. So if you're not already a member of Mofu, it's our subscription tier. You can get access to that by visiting bit.ly/go Mofu. Would love to have you join us there. Basically, this is sort of the subscription tier of Tofu, and it's really dedicated to folks who are freelancers or agencies who are looking to grow their business. So our content's not really focused on how to write great blog content. It's about how do I get more clients? How do I build systems? How do I hire people? How do I sort of scale and grow my business in a sustainable way? And so, Kaleigh's email templates are in there for the next few months. You'll be able to grab those. We've got about $4,000 worth of additional resources inside. We also host these monthly live Q&As. So this is kind of a free preview, if you will, of what's inside Mofu, where we have conversations like this every month discussing topics related to growing your business and fielding your questions. So yeah, would love to have you check that out. If you have questions about Mofu, you feel free to ping me on Slack in the Tofu channel, which again you can join for free. And yeah, would love to have you join us in Mofu as well if that's a good fit for you. Great. Well, let's talk really quickly about sort of onboarding and setting expectations, because again, I think this is something that people sort of gloss over. They think, hey, I got the yes from the client, I'm just going to dive right in and get straight to work. Can you talk us through how do you sort of set expectations about how you work or what you need, or what the process is going to look like when you're starting work with a client?
Right. Yeah, so mine is loosely based on somebody who was a kind of a mentor to me. So I have worked with a few established freelance writers early in my career just because I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea how to tackle any process, let alone this specific one. So she was a really nice guiding figure for me as far as like, okay, here's how this goes. And so one of the things I learned very quickly was that when you're getting started with a project, there's a lot of information that needs to be collected up front. And that kind of applies to both sides of the relationship. The client needs
Mm,
to give me a lot of information as the freelancer, and I need to give them a lot of information about my expectations and my availability and my process and workflow and my payment expectations. Because when we let these details slide, what happens is we get into the project, we do all this work, and then we're scrambling at the end, right? We've all probably been in that scenario where it's like, oh no, I forgot to say like, no, I don't want to wait 90 days to get paid, or no, I'm not available on a Saturday at 10 p.m. to answer your emails because that's insane. I can't believe you're asking me for that, but you are. I should have laid that out clearly that we're not going to do that, and so scope creep is a big one. A lot of these expectations laid out up front in this kind of onboarding message keeps the scope creep in check so that they're not asking for things that are way beyond what we initially agreed to for the project. Timing, as far as like how long is this project going to take? What are the expectations around turnaround time and handling edits and all those important details? Like I said, payment. Is there an upfront deposit required? Yes, there should be, by the way. And then When is the second half of that payment due based on when the work is delivered? Just really getting into the weeds on all of these specific details about like how do you best work with me and how can I best be of service to you as an external third party to your business. It's about getting really clear about those details and making sure that we're very much on the same page so there aren't those points of friction down the road when we get really far into the project.
Oh my God, 1,000% can't say enough. Just setting those expectations. I mean, and that's the funny thing about that, right? Is that I think people think that it's obvious, right? That
And yes.
you live in your business, hey, it takes me this long to write a post, or hey, I only work Monday through Thursday, or whatever. You have all these things
Mhm.
that you have established in your brain that you feel like should be obvious to your client, and they're not, right? And so it's
They're
not
just
about
not.
it's not necessarily like a malicious thing. It's not necessarily that your clients are bad people or that they're difficult to work with in some cases. It's that you have not set those expectations up front. And so how would they
Mhm.
possibly know? How would they possibly know what's going to work best for you or how you work or what your process is like? And so just spelling that out is just such a valuable thing. And so just for context for folks on the stream here, one of the email templates is sort of focused on this idea of kind of setting some of those expectations up front. As you said, I think scope, what is included, what is not included, the timeline and timing. So this is going to take this many days. The
Mhm.
timeline is going to look like this. We're going to follow these exact steps. And then sort of the administrative and like working relationship part, right? So send me an email instead of a text message or whatever
Yes.
whatever it is, sort of establishing those kind of parameters. I think those are the three big ones that are super important. And then the other thing that I think is valuable here is just like the idea of setting personal boundaries, right? So I think
Mm.
that's the other part of it, right? Is that like part of those expectations, yes, is just like giving them information that may seem obvious, but it's also people tend to respect the boundaries that have been set if they're clearly articulated.
Yes. And I think that that was one thing that was very hard for me as a very beginner freelance writer was I was just happy to be there, right? I was just thrilled to be hired in the first place. So I was like, sure, treat me like garbage. That's fine. Just please pay me. And that got old so quickly. So very quickly after that initial phase burned off, I thought, okay, I need to be more clear up front about what works for me and what's acceptable, what's not, because I had a couple of nightmare clients who wanted me to be on the phone at 6:30 p.m. on a Friday and kind of be on call, really. I mean, or they had projects that would just spiral out of control, and so the initial agreement would just be leaps and bounds in the distance, and I would be doing things that were just so far beyond what we initially discussed and not getting paid for it.
Yeah.
So again, it's one of those things that you kind of learn through trial and error and through negative experiences. And my hope with these templates is that it saves people from getting into those
That pain.
situations
Yeah.
because I learned it the hard way. So let me save you a lot of time and energy and just use the template so you have this stuff in line up front and you're not doing the same stupid stuff I was.
Save yourself the pain. At least if you
Mhm.
can, spare yourself a little bit of it. The,
Yes.
the other thing I want to mention is contracts, right? So I think a lot of
Mm.
folks think that the contract is obviously is legally binding, and so that dictates everything, and if it should all be spelled out in the contract, and that's all that matters. I tend to disagree. What's sort of your take on sort of communicating and let's say via email or like plain text versus just putting it in the contract?
Yeah. It's really, again, I think it's very person to person based. A lot of the clients I work with at this point, I've worked with for a very long time. So I don't have a lot of first time brand new clients, but I think it's always better to be safe than sorry when it comes to starting with a brand new client that you've never worked before and to have that contract in place so that there is some documentation that you can point back to if things do kind of go off course or go awry or kind of start to get a little bit of gray area around them. I think you can just kind of again gut check what feels right. Do you need something that's super formalized and is outside of the context of an email? Do you need something that's kind of like a PDF that you have sent and signed off on and you keep that on your records? It's always good to have something that's been signed off on. I feel like that's my kind of rule of thumb, especially with a brand new first time client. If it's somebody that
Mhm.
you've worked with for a million years and you're doing month after month work, you don't need to send a new contract every month. But If it's somebody that you've never worked with before, again, you don't know if they're going to pay you. And I think that that's the biggest one. You want to make sure that they have something to be held accountable for, that they've signed off on, that says, yes, we've agreed to this project. We're going to pay you X amount by X date. That saves you a lot of time. And again, chasing down payments, because who wants to do that? Who wants to do that after the work is done? Nobody.
1000%. For the record, I would definitely recommend, you have a contract in place in any client engagement, that's involved
Yes.
exchanging time for money, that kind of thing, or work for money. I think, it's always good to have a contract, but my recommendation to folks is always like, basically don't rely on the contract to like set the expectations in your relationship, because I have a
Right.
secret for you. A lot of people don't read the contracts. So, so even if your contract spells everything out in ironclad language, there's like a 90% chance that people are glossing over those details. They sign the thing, they know they owe you X dollars for Y thing, but all the other details slip past.
Yes.
The other trap that I think people fall into, right, is that like anytime you have to point to the contract to try to like make a point or win an argument with your client, like you've lost. Like you're creating friction. Like it's a bad experience for the client. Like that's never the situation you want to be in. And so even if it's spelled out clearly in the contract, even if it's legally binding, whatever it is, it's always better to communicate that plainly and clearly to people, in a way that they'll be able to understand it, rather than just bury it somewhere in the legalese and expect that they know that that's the truth, right? Like
Yeah.
that's just not a good way to operate, in my opinion.
It's not realistic. And I think you have to remember that these are human beings who have busy lives and busy schedules. And so you have to kind of meet them where they are. And I think having a templatized email that pulls out the most important pieces of information, like the things we just talked about, as far as like project scope, expectations for your working hours, payment, those things, put that in those, use that templated email and send that over. Because like you said, not everybody's going to read every line of a contract, but you want them to have those very core details right in this environment where they're looking for conversation and back and forth with you. So pulling out those essential pieces and putting it right in front of them is a good way to make sure that they're seeing it. I've even seen some freelancers who have kind of a getting started booklet. It's like a PDF package that they'll send over. Again, so many times I've heard, yeah, the client never read it. They just didn't even bother. And so remember, like, email is probably a place that they're checking and opening and reading their emails. Meet them where they are, give them the core pieces of information, and it'll save you a lot of trouble.
Yeah, totally. I mean, again, I always think this is funny, but it's like, look, we communicate for a living, right? We're writers,
Mhm.
we create content. Think about the content that you create, right? Are you going to write a blog post in, dense legalese, or are you going to put it in a short bullet point format that's easy to read and easy to digest? Obviously,
Yes.
the latter, right? Same thing with
Yes.
any communications that you're having with folks. So,
Yes.
one last note on that I'll also mention, just because this is another tip or another thing that I always tell people to keep in mind, is that again, 100%, you should have a contract in every relationship, but keep in mind that your contract is only valuable, to the extent in which you're willing to enforce it. So, are you really going to sue somebody over a $1,000 blog post? Probably not. So at the end of the day, your contract is not going to save you, basically, is what I'm
Right.
trying to say.
That's a good call out. That's true.
um, I want to talk a little bit. So we've been talking a little bit about kind of setting those expectations up front, clarifying, this is how I work. This is, this is what's included. This is what's not included, those types of things. Uh, Talk to me a little bit about kind of a time where, the client tries to sort of dictate or impose, let's say a workflow or a system, hey, Kaleigh, we really need you to do it this way, or we need you to work in this particular system that you've never used before. How do you sort of handle those situations?
Yeah. Again, I think it's a case by case thing. In some cases, it's simply unavoidable because they have their established workflow. Truly, from a legal standpoint, they're not allowed to do that. They're not, because you're an independent contractor, they can't tell you how to work and how to deliver the product and what tools to use. However, the reality of the situation is that sometimes you have to be flexible. And again, we talked about that earlier, the importance of being flexible and being adaptable. And again, I think that there are moments when you can kind of say, okay, I can get up to speed on this. Again, you have to take into consideration a lot of factors here. Is this somebody you're going to be working with on a long-term basis? If so, getting up to speed on this tool and getting onboarded and figuring out how to use it is probably a good time investment because it's going to pay off for you in the long run. If it's somebody who wants it for a one-off low dollar project, that might be something to push back on and say, well, actually, my best workflow happens by using Google Docs. I can hand this off to you. Then you can upload it into your CMS or your software, whatever you need to use. But I think like I said, it really depends on what's the context surrounding the project. Is it going to be a good investment for you, or is it going to be something that's going to make you invest a lot more time, which again, time is money when you're a freelancer. So it's tough. You have to really balance that.
Yeah, totally. I agree with you there. I would say, 90% of the time, we generally try to push back against clients, and obviously, I'm running an agency, so it's a little different than being a freelancer. But, anytime a client's like, oh, hey, we need you to follow this particular workflow, that kind of thing, you know, we always try to establish up front. And again, coming back to that idea of setting those expectations, if you state clearly, hey, this is what I do, I write in Google Docs, I hand off a Google Doc to you, you take it from
Mm-hmm.
there, then it's much less likely in my experience that the client's going to come back and be like, oh, well, actually, can you do it this other way? Because you've already sort
Yeah,
of established that expectation that like, I do this and not that. So I
right.
think that's a pretty important part.
And that's part of being a professional too, of coming into that dynamic of the relationship and saying, actually, this is how I work. This is my optimal workflow. This is how you're going to get the best quality of work at the most efficient pace, and everybody's going to be happy this way. Again, if you
Mhm.
don't have that laid out in documentation up front, you're kind of allowing them to steer you in whatever direction they want to take you. So it's I think it's good to go into those dynamics and say, this is my tried and tested workflow. This is the best outcomes you're going to get from me are going to be achieved through this process. And again, like that takes a lot of confidence to be able to say that too, because you're kind of taking the reins with the conversation and saying, actually, this is how I'd like to do it. That looks good to the client too. I think that's good for the freelancer to do.
Totally agree with that. I think that's also another overlooked aspect is that, as a professional, having kind of a defined system in place makes a big difference. And sort of it communicates sort of confidence and value.
Hmm.
But it also, I think, establishes trust, right? Like how
Yes.
weird would it be if the plumber came over to your house and they're like, I don't know, how do you want me to fix it? Like, they're asking you for
Exactly.
direction, right? Like you would never trust
Exactly.
that plumber, right? So I think the same
No.
idea applies here. If you come in and say, you can state confidently, hey, here's how I work, here's what you need, here's how I'm going to do it, that kind of
Mhm.
thing. The closer you can get to that, right? That's the ideal state. As you said, there's flexibility in the middle somewhere. Hey, if I hire a freelance writer or optimist, you do have to bend a little bit to our process, otherwise it's just never going to work out. And so,
Sure.
we can't all be, get 100% of what we want, but having those expectations up front, saying those expectations up front, I think is goes a long way for sure.
It does. It really sets the tone for sure.
Mm. Um, I'd love to pivot now to sort of the third template in the bundle if we can, and so the
Sure.
the third the third template is talking about offboarding,
Mhm.
which again I personally think is sort of an underutilized stage in the relationship. Talk to us a little bit about kind of how you offboard clients and how you think about offboarding.
Yeah. So again, this is a little bit situational based on if you did a short-term project where they're not going to be coming back for recurring projects over and over again. I think the offboarding is really important because this is how you set up that referral engine or referral flywheel for your business. Because this is that moment where you can come in and say, I so appreciated working with you, first of all. So you get to say thank you. Second of all, I'd love a testimonial if you were happy with my work that I can then use as a social proof point on my website, in future proposals, on social media. And then number three, it's a place for you to make an ask for future referrals. And I think kind of like with a traditional blog post, you've got to have that call to action at the end. And in the context of a freelancer, the end of a project is the end of the blog post. So the call to action is, I would love if you would pass my name along to somebody else. If you know somebody, who works in a similar space or has a similar need, I'm taking on new clients right now. I've got some availability. I would appreciate that so much. And I think this is the piece that so many freelancers miss is they forget to make that ask. And
Mhm.
that's where that missed opportunity as far as future business that's very, very low lift comes in. Because if you can get referrals, those are the easiest to convert into actual real paying work because they've been pre-vetted by somebody else. So I think that this exit process, and again, that's what the template is kind of a format that's quick and easy. It's conversational. It doesn't feel super aggressive or pushy, but it's humble, it's appreciative, and it's got that call to action of, if you know anybody else who needs a writer doing similar work, please send them my way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love. I want to zoom in on sort of two points here. One is going back to that idea of everything being relationship focused, right? So much of this comes down to relationships that, like, if you treat
Yes.
every client like it's just a transaction in and out, then you're going to get treated the same way, right? And so, as you said, those relationships and sort of establishing that potential referral network, that is going to pay off 100x down the line if you can
Oh yeah.
maintain those relationships and build really healthy relationships. So, yeah, I think that is such a overlooked thing, especially if, hey, maybe you're upset that the client's ending the contract or whatever, or there's not more work or whatever it is. It's easy to sort of blow those people off, but
Hmm.
just totally doing yourself a disservice by taking that approach, in my opinion. Um, and then the second thing I want to just mention here is, like, asking, right? Seems obvious, and maybe it should be obvious to everyone. Hey, I would love referrals. That should be obvious, but it's not, right? Again, just taking that going that extra step, making the actual direct ask of, hey, do you happen to know anyone, or if you know anyone, could you please send them my way? You'd be surprised how
Big
often
time.
that is effective.
It's wildly effective. And like I said, it's such a low lift for both parties involved. I think that it's such a no-brainer. But again, we get wrapped up in moving on to the next thing. It's the first thing to go. It's the first thing we forget to do. And so many times when I've sent an exit email, the referral has come within 1 to 2 weeks afterwards, just because it's top of mind, right? It's a very sticky thing of, oh, Kaleigh said she's got availability for more projects. I've got this coworker in my ear who has a similar project. Let me make this introduction. Because when it comes down to it, think about how taxed our brains are these days with the massive amount of information we process with social media, with everything. We need to make things as simple, as memorable, and as sticky as possible. And making a simple ask like this that's very straightforward is a really easy way to get those things to happen. And it's so duh, but it's so underutilized, like you said.
Yeah, again, I just think that we tend to, we tend to be so focused on ourselves that we, of course, sort of the human condition, right, is that we think everybody else is thinking about us all the time, and they're not,
Of
right?
course. Mhm,
And so,
absolutely not.
even if I know Kaylee and I know that she, writes for SaaS and e-commerce businesses, if I haven't talked to or thought about Kaylee for 6 months, if somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, I need a writer for my SaaS business," there's a pretty low chance that I'm going to actually think, "Oh yeah, Kaylee." But if I just talked to Kaylee last week, there's a much higher
Exactly.
chance that she's going to be top of mind for me. So I think, yeah, just
Exactly.
maintaining that relationship, being top of mind, making that direct ask, I think super, super duper valuable. Um, Cool. Well, let's see, we've got about 8 minutes, 7.5 minutes here. So I want to give one more quick shout out here to the chat. Folks joining us, thank you so much for joining us on this live stream. We've got one question in the chat we'll address here in a moment. If you have additional questions for Kaylee about, what have we been lead gen, client qualification, screening, onboarding, offboarding, referrals, any of those types of questions, or really anything related to growing, building, scaling your business, pop those in the chat, and we'll try to get you some input there. Um, I wanted to ask one more follow up on that, sort of referral as you're offboarding a client and asking for that referral. Do you, or how often do follow up with someone?
Yes. It depends on how busy I am is the most honest, candid answer. However, I would say because my business right now has been kind of in a weird spot and the economy is kind of weird, I feel like I've become more consistent with the follow up. So it's been every 3 months or every 6 months because, again, when work starts to get slow, when the notebook's not very full, I'm thinking, okay, I need to be proactive here and start following up on these people because, again, maybe they've forgotten that I am taking on new projects. Maybe they're just assuming that my workload is full, that I'm too busy. And if I'm not, I need to make sure that they remember that so that if something comes across their desk, they can remember to send it my way. And I think a lot of freelancers get in their own way over this type of work. They think, oh, I'm being annoying or I'm being too pushy, I'm being aggressive. No, I think people really appreciate it. It's a nice way to check in and be top of mind with that existing client. It's a nice way to resurface the ask that you made initially. And it's very fruitful. I would say 90% of the time it ends up in some form of additional work for me. So I would always encourage people, don't get super in your head about the follow-up. I think one follow-up every 3 months is probably my rule of thumb as far as maximum, but people are busy. So if you need to do it more than once, that's okay. That's okay. I think that we just kind of, like I said, need to get out of our own ways about it and stop overthinking.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Michael was just echoing that in the chat, saying that he can generally shake loose a project or two by following up. I think that's and again, it's sort of that flywheel effect. As you build your business over time, you make more connections, even if it doesn't lead to work right now. You maintain those relationships, you continue to build and grow, and a lot of that also resonates. As I said, we last month we had Lizzie Davy, and she was talking about warm pitching, and her sort of approach to warm pitching is essentially networking, right? And so just
Mhm.
building connections, even if people don't have work for you right the second, maintaining those relationships over the long term is going to give you that foundation and really help you, grow the business in a more consistent way. So I love that. Uh, Tiggy Tiggy had this question in the chat, which I think is of course the $10 billion question that we all are asking and answering over and over again. But just quick two cents from you, Kaleigh. How do you feel AI has sort of impacted you and your business?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's difficult to say. My feeling is that it's probably reducing my workload, and that's part of the reason it's been so difficult to come back, is that people are curious about these tools and they are experimenting with them. But I think what they're finding fairly quickly is that those tools are not producing finished products. And so what I'm finding is that some of these clients who are using AI tools now need a really good editor to come in and make them publishable, because they're not there yet. They're like a C plus average as far as quality goes. So this is something else I would say to freelance writers who are not as busy as they would like to be. With these AI tools and the fact that they're not going away, maybe it's time for us to start thinking about adjacent services that kind of complement the fact that these tools exist. And maybe that's editing, maybe that's writing prompts, maybe that's finding good ways to engineer, like offloading some of the more tedious pieces of a process when it comes to writing, and being the go-to person for, hey, I use AI writing tools to generate 10 pieces of social copy, whatever it might be. So I don't, like I said, I don't think it's going away. I don't think it's the end of freelance writing as an industry, but I do think it's something that we need to be curious about and find ways to use it to our advantage.
100%. Yeah. And going back to what you were saying before, being flexible, especially, if you're in a situation where you're really just sort of treading water or struggling to get work, now is an ideal time to think about, how do I upskill? How do I learn some other skills that are going to be, maybe more protected from AI's
Mhm.
capabilities. One of the things that we've discussed a lot in Tofu is, helping folks upskill into more strategic work, so maybe, doing research, planning, content strategy kind of
Yes.
roles. All that stuff I think is a really good step if that's something that you're struggling with.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, Kaleigh, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today. Are there anything else that you wanted to mention? Anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to go over or throw out for the audience?
I don't think so. I think the final closing note that I would leave people with is just be persistent, right? Every freelance career has its ups and downs. Sometimes that happens every week, sometimes it happens every month, but I think it's important to stay resilient. Again, keep sharpening your skills, keep learning new things. Don't stop and be like, no, I'm good. I've got this figured out. And be persistent with your follow-ups, with your outreach, with all the things that you're doing. It's really easy to get discouraged. So I would just say it's kind of a weird time right now. Hang in there. And if you do all the things that we've talked about today, you're going to be doing just fine.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. I think, yeah, especially now more than ever, right? It's just a matter of
Yeah.
iteration. We're all iterating, and we're iterating faster than ever with all the
Yep.
technology and AI and everything happening. So,
So
well,
true.
once again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, Kaleigh. I want to just give a couple quick final shout outs. First of all, as I already mentioned, if you've not joined Tofu, join us there. It's our free community, yesoptimist.com/tofu. That's where you're going to find out about all of our upcoming sessions. We've got some more amazing guests, live workshops, Q&As, all kinds of cool stuff there to help you learn and upskill and continue to evolve. And secondly, if you found this discussion valuable and you're interested in more content about how to grow your business, get more clients, standardize your processes, level up across the board, check out Mofu, bit.ly/go Mofu. That's where you can get access to sort of our focused resources for helping you build and scale your business. Would love to have you there as well. That's all for me for today. Kaleigh, again, just one more thank you so much. And I hope you
Yeah,
have a great rest
thanks.
of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks all for joining us today. Have a good one and see you soon. Cheers.